Well, it's Monday morning, and it's time for Chris to do what he likes to do on a Monday morning. And you're here at SIRENNET Television Studio number 1. Let's go across to Chris, and he has in his hand a G7 PA. Take it away, Chris.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Stuart, and thank you for joining me here on SIRENNET Television. I have here Whelen's G7 PA mini strobe bar. I'm going to give you an overview of how it comes apart and what's inside the unit. So to start things off, I'm going to remove the 2 outer screws here that hold the outer dome on. Go ahead, pull this off here. You can see it's a one-piece non-optic dome with a center diamond reflector. The diamond reflector helps produce a little bit more light output between the 2 strobe beacons inside. Here's a look inside, and if some of you are thinking, I've seen domes like that before, it's actually the same ones that Whelen uses on their 2022 strobe beacons. Inside here, you have a center-mounted power supply. That's a 2-outlet, 40-watt, and then 2 dummy beacons. I'll show you the dummy factor in just a minute here. I'm going to remove these units here. They're fixed in with a total of 3 screws on each unit. And that 3rd screw as well. So with those 3 screws removed from the base of the 2022, we'll call it here just for a moment, you can see that it's a quick connect harness. So I'll go ahead, disconnect that here, and I'm going to give you an inside look at what's in your 2022 dummy or slave unit. Same process that you would do with the 2022. I'll remove the 2 screws here that hold the dome to the base. Give the dome a little bit of a wiggle here. So inside here, you can see that you have your center-mounted strobe tube, but what you don't have is a power supply affixed behind the strobe tube assembly. In the case of a 2022, you have a built-in power supply with capacitors, wiring relays, different functions built into it as well to handle the voltage for the strobe. In this case, the strobe is connected to a small, quick disconnect harness. We maybe show on a close-up there, inside here. Wiring harness in here, which in turn connects to the power supply outlet inside the Guardian. So to give you a better idea of how this is working, I'm going to go ahead and remove the center mount power supply here. It's mounted into the polycarbonate base, again with another 2 Phillips head screws. So you can see here we have the power supply. It's got a protective casing on the top, and I'm going to go ahead, take this off as well, disconnect the harness so I can pull the power supply out completely for you here. So again, I'll take the 3 screws, affixing the inner strobe assembly. Again here, you can go ahead, remove it from the inside base, quick connect harness, which I can remove there. So again, free up the assembly here. Give you an inside view of what it looks like. And you can see you have your appropriate mounting tabs here. Power supply, I'll go ahead, disconnect from its quick connect as well. And here you have it. This is what makes your strobes flash and change to different patterns. Inside here, you have your center mount capacitor, variety of different relay boards, and control mechanisms for running the unit. On these units here, if you were curious, the strobe assembly can be removed with two, again, Phillips head screws, which are ever so popular when it comes to Whelen and their components. So for the strobe tube, should you ever need to replace one, loosen your two mount screws. And again, don't touch the strobe because you don't want to get any grease or grime on it from your fingers. Give it a wiggle. Get those two screws freed out. And here is your strobe assembly. If you need a new one, give us a call. It's Whelen's FT20A. See, it easily affixes into its mount board here, kind of like a smiley face. And again, nothing inside here as far as the power supply. So the strobe is running from the harness here, and in turn to the center mount power supply, which then sends a nice charge of power to the pair of strobes to flash them. Now that I've taken this apart, made a bit of a mess, gonna go ahead, do a bit of reassembly here. Again, slides in there. Only one way, so follow the smiley face and you'll have it perfect every time. Then I'll take my small Phillips head screws that affix the strobe onto its mount board. Go ahead, take my dome here, realign it onto its base with its appropriate mount holes, one in the front, one in the rear. A fun feature with the Guardian is that for folks that want to have the G7 in different colors outside of an amber here, you can actually put colored domes on your inside strobe assemblies, then take a clear outer dome, and then you'll have a colored unit. So you could have a red, white, red, amber, blue, red. Color choices are up to you. I'm going to put my power supply back in first, connecting the harness here. Had it right the first time. Connects nice and snugly. I'll take my two strobe cables, route one to the left, one to the right. Now I can go ahead, take my two retainer screws for the power supply, line those back up onto the base mounts here. So with the center mount strobe power supply remounted, I can now go ahead, take the two strobe assemblies, remembering to do the connections on the bottom here. And you'll see on the bottom, you have a total of 3 mounting holes. So you can go ahead, line those up to the mounting tabs again on the base. Adjust the wiring harness a little bit so it sits nice and flush. So that's cinched down nice and tight. Go ahead, repeat the process for the other side here. Make sure I have my tabs lined up. And again, with the process of those world-famous Whelen Phillips head mounting screws. Take a quick look, make sure everything looks okay before I go ahead, put the dome back on. And again, another pair of screws to complete the assembly. And the other one for the other side here as well. So now that I've done the reassembly for the G7 here, I'm going to go ahead, make sure everything's working nice and proper. Before I do that, on the bottom, you have 4 pigtails, a ground, a lead, a flash pattern change, and a violet high-low wire. So I'm going to go ahead, connect these to power now, show you the functions here. And let it live. So you can see, nice and bright. Canister here firing away, canister here firing away. If I take the white trigger wire here, apply it to 12 volts momentarily, you can see that the flash pattern will change. Nice function is the unit will retain the pattern it's set to, so if you disconnect power, reconnect power, it's on the same pattern until you go back in and re-change it with the trigger wire. So again, for the bar's high-low function, which is controlled by the violet intensity trigger wire for the high-low, if you provide it to 12 volts power, you can see that the intensity turns down. So I'll disconnect it and reconnect it. So there you have it, Whelen's G7 PA Guardian Series Dual Strobe Minibar. Again, I'm Chris with SIRENNET Television. Thanks for spending some time with me here. Back to you, Stuart.
Well, a great product made by, thanks Chris, a great product made by the gang over there at Whelen. I'm Stuart, and as always, thanks for watching SIRENNET Television.